I'm Adam Penning, and these are my top key tips for winter location. At any time of year, wherever you are, whatever sort of lake you're on, whether it's well stocked or whether it's understocked, unstocked wouldn't be great, would it? If it's understocked, but whatever kind of carp lake you're fishing, there is nothing more important than location, and getting that right is 70-80% of the game. In fact, you could argue that if you've got a rig that you know is going to work and a bait they're willing to open their mouths for, and those bases are covered, which really they should be, then location is 100% of the game, because you just need to put the right bait and the right rig, which you've already got in your locker, where they are. So 100% of your game, that's quite, it doesn't get any bigger than that. And it's, when you consider it like that, it's astonishing to me that so many anglers pay little or no credence to it. So location in the winter becomes much more challenging than it is in the summer and spring and autumn months. But not only is it much more challenging, it is even more vital and pertinent to our success, because in the other months where the carp are active and they're transitioning around the lake, even if you've got it wrong, there is a chance that the carp will pay you a visit or a flyby as they're going about their travels. You know, they could come past and find you, in inverted commas. So in the winter, that is, the chances of that happening are very, very remote indeed. When the water gets very, very cold, carp being cold-blooded and having genetics which aren't predisposed to dealing with cold water, unlike pike, perch, chub and so on, they become torpid almost to a point that they can spend weeks on end doing nothing, just sat still in a huddle. So when they're doing that, very often they will tend to do it within numbers of other carp. They won't be one over there, one over there, one over there. They tend to shoal up. Now, when you get to a point where the majority of your stock is holed up in one tight area together, like sardines, you know, it can mean that maybe 98% of even a small lake has literally got no carp in it. So when you think of it like that the entire stock of carp in a particular lake can be in a 10 square yard area, then if you're not exactly where they are, you ain't catching nothing, no matter what you do. So that's why location is more challenging in the winter, for those two reasons, because they get so compacted and because they're not traveling around and they're not going to find you if you've got it wrong. What do we do to get ourselves in those right positions? Now, location is watercraft. They're exactly the same thing. Watercraft isn't some dark Jedi art or something like that. It's just looking and observing constantly and taking in information that the lake and its surroundings and its inhabitants and the bird life and everything is going to give you. There's signs, even on the coldest, bleakest day, there will be signs that something is going on somewhere, and it's down to us to identify those and then react accordingly. So today is an interesting one, because I've walked the lake at first light, didn't see any fish roll. Again, most coarse fish species are most active at first light and at last light. So if you can, always try and get to a lake at first light, whether it's summer or winter as it is now, because if there is a chance of a fish rolling, that is when it's most likely to be. If you see a fish roll, if you actually see carp flesh, as I call it, then it's game on. It's unmistakable. But very often the signs are a lot more subtle than actual carp flesh. So on this particular session, we've been looking since we arrived. We didn't see anything roll, so luckily we're blessed with it's quite a breezy day, but actually the wind isn't really ruffling the surface, and that makes it really good for looking for bubblers and fizzers. Before I get on to that, the first thing that I did whilst I was looking for actual carp movement breaching through the surface of the water, I'm also assessing carefully any areas of coloured water. As it happens, the lake is pretty clear all round, which isn't a good sign, but very often you'll find that the area the carp are in, and I've seen it this week on another lake that I was at, a very low stock lake, the area that the fish choose to hold up in becomes tinged with colour throughout the water column. That is an absolute gold dust giveaway. If you're walking around your lake and you see a change in the coloration of the water, then pay that some serious attention. There wasn't any here today. It was all quite clear, which again isn't great, but we got ourselves fishing to some dead lily pads, which are a great feature for most species. Carp love dead lily pads and they're still on the surface, so I thought that would be a good starting point. Once we've got the rods in position, it's a matter of earnestly watching the water, and I can't emphasize how important that is. And actually, it's probably the biggest, most important, most vital and rewarding skill of all, is that continuous burning of optical calories and watching the lake from the minute you get to the lake, but after you've got the rods in position. A lot of people probably sit back, relax and wait for things to unfold, but if you do that, you could be missing out on an awful lot. And here, even within the first 40 minutes of fishing, we've already moved the rods because of something we've seen. As I said, there isn't much ripple on the lake today, and we've been able to identify an area of consistent fizzing. Fizzing's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. It's more small clusters of bubbles coming up around a particular zone, just shy of some lily pads. And it was so evident, and it is so important to react to those things, that I've moved both of my rods to exactly where those bubbles are. Within half an hour of doing so, I've had my first liner of the day. So that again tells us that we've now got two rods in an area where there's carp, and very fortunately for us, you know, they're fizzing, they're truffling around down there in the lake bed, sending up these telltale signs of where they are. So they're quite subtle, I suppose. You know, to an experienced angler, you know, it's pretty obvious. You know, you'd have to be Stevie Wonder not to see what's going on out there. There's bubbles coming up around the zone in 2s and 3s. There's various things going on, but once you've shifted your emphasis onto something that is definitely there that you can go for, then you're looking for liners. So I'm really not fishing with my lines as I would if I knew I was exactly bang on lots of carp and they were big wary fish. I'd be probably tempted to get my lines down low and fish them quite slack so I didn't disturb them. But I want to be absolutely sure that I'm in the area where the bulk of these fish are. So I'm fishing with my line a little bit higher in the water than I normally would. The bobbin is sat up erect and ready on a maximum sensitivity setting on the radar, so that if anything does touch the line, I'm going to know about it quite quickly. And it's already happened. One of the rods has twitched and lifted, and that is unquestionably where a carp has hit the line. Now, if we didn't have the bubbles to go on, and we didn't have the carp flesh to go on, liners are probably the next best thing in terms of winter location, because when you do get your rigs in an area where there are carp, you will get liners, slow little lifts and indications which are imperative. You know, there's been many times where I put the jigsaw together just based on liners, moving rods around, fishing deliberately for a liner with my line, as I said, held up higher through the water column than perhaps it normally would be. And once I've, you know, the thing to bear in mind is that if you get a liner, what sort of liner are you getting? Now, if you've got a liner where the bobbin's gone all the way up to the top and then back down quite quickly, then it's probably a fish that's closer to you than where you're casting. And certainly the speed of that liner will usually indicate a fish much closer. If a fish comes through close to the rod tip, it can be quite an aggressive liner, but if it's happening much further out near where your rig is, it will be a lot more subtle, just little bleeps and knocks and maybe small lifts. That will tell you that you'll pretty much bang on where you need to be. But if you're getting big rises and they're quite speedy, then you're a long way past the fish. And if I was faced with that, I'd be tempted to, well, I wouldn't be tempted, I would be starting to peg my cast back 5-10 yards at a time until the liners, the nature of the liners, the dynamic of the speed and the actual distance that the liner, the bobbin travelled, was reduced right down to just little knocks and pulls and so on, and then you know you're right in amongst them. So as we're doing a day session today, but location at this time of year is something that becomes very much a nocturnal graft as well. Most of the fish that get caught during this phase are in the dark, and that could be at 5-6 in the evening, or it could be at 2 in the morning. I've found over the years that the majority of winter captures that I've had have been in the dark, usually in the first part of the evening, sort of 7 till midnight, something like that. On a lot of lakes is a key period, but you know, 3-4 in the morning, just when you don't want to be getting out of that sleeping bag, can be a very good time as well. So when the carp are actually feed, you know, if they are the bite times, then they are also the times, if you can identify a bite time, they are the times when you're most likely to see or hear a fish as well, because if they're active enough to give you a bite, that is probably the time that they're active enough to give a lazy roll or poke the tip of their nose out and so on. So as it gets into darkness, don't switch off. You know, if you shut your door down on your bivvy and go in and watch a film with headphones on, you will be absolutely oblivious to fish rolling over in the dark, and sometimes they can be quite audible, and you only need to hear one and pinpoint it with precision, and it could be a game changer for your entire winter campaign. Can't stress that enough. If you find where they are now, then you're probably good for the next few months. You know, they won't tend to stray too far from where they are now. So missing one of those signs is a sin in my opinion, no, unless you really like camping. We're all here to catch fish, and I will very often, well, I will always be sat there listening in the dark and waiting for any signs that I might be given. Just as a sort of just to put some brackets around that, one of the biggest impediments to the modern carp angler is, so if we accept that watercraft and location are the pinnacle, the most important values that will give us that success, the one thing that is the impediment to that, which is has become so common now, is we are in the age of social media. And all the time now when I'm at a lake, I see people just swiping, you know, and that will be the biggest barrier to you being a successful carp angler. I mean, to me, the more people that do it, the better, because I know if I'm on a lake where the other 6 anglers are not looking at the lake, I have got a massive, huge advantage. For myself, we're all active, you know, it's a digital age, but I get on and do my social media in the dark. I've got my ears open on the lake, but I can scroll and do my messages and so on once it's dark. I don't do it during the day because I might miss that one sign, and you know, sometimes it can just be one sign that might be your biggest fish of the winter. It might lead to the best, most successful winter that you've ever had. But if you don't see those signs, then you will miss out. So this is all part of location and watercraft. It's listening, it's looking as hard as you can, and it's being aware of what's going on. Get yourself into the right situation. Don't take your eye off the ball. And as I said, there is no more fundamentally important bit of winter information or tips that I could give you than putting those locational things into practice. So now we're going to look at a technical edge for boilie fishing. It's an edge that I've never put on camera before, never put in a magazine article, because it's too good. So we're going to start off by, and this is absolutely brilliant for winter fishing. It's something that I've used an awful lot, and it's worked for me with very, very big fish up to, well, including my biggest carp that I've ever caught in this country. So it works very well. So I've got on the hair here a 12mm Manila Active boilie, and I've got on the whipping a very small but very strong prototype hook. That's about a size 10. That I've tied it to soft supple braid. No one uses braid anymore these days. It's all about stiff extension, stiff booms, but when you tie a small hook to soft supple braid, you get an incredible amount of movement. Moreover, when you tie it with a whipping knot where the hair exits from the eye, so basically I'm doing one turn to trap the hair, and then I'm doing 4 or 5 the other side of the hair to kick it out and trap it. And it means that when you pick the boilie up, look at the hook, it's hanging down ready to catch in that bottom lip straight away. The hook is ridiculously honed with my filing kit, which is another edge all in itself. Super sharp hooks unquestionably help you catch more fish, in my opinion. But this is only part of something that's very, very special, and it's been working incredibly well for me. It might make you laugh that what I consider to be the biggest edge in my angling these days is this. A good old 3-bait PVA stringer. A real blast from the past, something that isn't used anymore, and something which is currently, and has been for well over a year, my most effective boilie fishing angling weapon. How you tie it is very important. So I lay the rig over it, and you'll see it clearly when I hold it up, but what you're doing is you're tying this PVA stringer around the hook link, and then you're pulling it tight. And what that gets, with 3 baits tied off tight with PVA string, you end up with a triangle of boilies. And what that does is perfectly protect the hook. So you can see here, hopefully, I've tied it so that the stringer, the circle of boilies, call it a circle stringer, slides on the hook link. And what you do is you slide it down, and it just sits over the hook like that. So the hook bait sits underneath where I'm holding it, and you've got 3 baits masking and sheathing the hook perfectly. That will cast miles, it will never tangle, and it presents just the right amount of food around your hook to catch a fish. And it's worked, believe it or not, best for me when I don't put any bait in, particularly on hard lakes. Just that on its own, devastatingly effective. So there's a couple of key things here. The hook bait is exactly the same as the free baits. So effectively you've got 4 bottom baits. No wafters, no pop-ups, nothing is done to that hook bait to make it stand out or be different in any way from the crowd. Not that 3 other baits is a crowd, but you get my drift. These days there is a total preoccupation with making hook baits different, making them what I call shouty. All my fishing is with baits that whisper seductively. Put them in the right spot and they will do an incredible job for you without raising any concern or alarm from the fish, and it will not make it think that it is being fished for, which is absolutely key. He's swimming along, sees 4 boilies laying on the bottom. It's a quick, easy meal, no hesitation, he eats them. I'm not going to bore you with the hit parade, if you like, of what I've caught on this. Just take my word for it. It's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So the next thing I want to show you is what I call my PVA depth charge system. It's just a very simple way of fishing a PVA bag on the end of the line. Now, I've never really liked solid bags and getting the rig crammed in there and making everything tight and compact, and unless you get them dead right, they don't cast particularly well. What I wanted was a system where I could fish the bag on the line with the lead on the end of the line, so the bag was behind it, and that means that it should really cast very, very well indeed. So the system that I came up with works in conjunction with a rotary rig, or more commonly known as the helicopter. So we have the sort of standard helicopter setup there with a sleeve and a top bead, and then on the end of the line, in this case the line, because I'm fishing just fluorocarbon straight through, but this could be on the end of a leader or a leg core leader or something like that, which is how I often do fish it, you have a little quick link. Now, what you need to do is make your stem. Now this is the part of the rig that makes it work so well, and it's basically a bomb with a boom of coated braid. Coated braid works best, I think, because it's durable. I mean, this takes quite a lot of impact and so on, and it doesn't fray or anything like that, whereas normal braid can fray. It's hard to get a needle into the loop, as you'll see in a minute, and mono just deteriorates so quickly. So soft coated braid like this is bang on. Now what I want to do is tie a boom with a tiny loop, or a little loop in the end like that, just about longer than the size of bag I'm going to use. So in this instance I'm using quite a big bag, so I'm fishing in quite close range, and you thread the entire bag onto the stem until the top of the loop exits through the top. Looking at it, I've probably made the bag a touch longer, but I'll get around that. But the great thing about this system is that if you want to fish out at really long range, you could put a 3 or 4 ounce lead on the end and cut the bag in half, you know, just make a much smaller bag, shorter boom, and then you're ready to go. In this instance, again, because I've got a big heavy bag, I'm using a small lead, 2 ounces, because I don't want to overload the casting capacity for the rod. The bag itself is probably a good 2.5 ounces, so with the lead, 4.5 ounces. So with care, I can cast that pretty much anywhere. So what I'm going to do is, this bag is loaded with the crumb and maggot mix that I showed you earlier. Now, because there are maggots in there, I've got a stringer needle. I'm going to pierce the end of the bag, and I'm going to carefully push the needle. It doesn't quite want to go in there, which is always the way when you're trying to do something for filming. So I'm going to push the needle up the middle of the bag, and what you're going to do is just gently push it and keep twisting it. And what that will do, on its way up the middle of that bag, it's coming across maggots. And I don't want to burst a maggot, obviously, because it's a PVA bag. So if you just gently push it and just keep twisting it, the maggots will move out of the way of the needle as it comes up through the bag. And you're just going to keep it going, bit at a time. Take your time with it. Do you know what? It's just starting to rain, which is always what you want when you're doing a little section on PVA. So you can see the needles come out the top end there, no maggot on the end of it because we've been very, very careful. Try and bring the needle right through the middle of the bottom of the bag and out through the middle of the top of the bag. Get your boom, hook it onto the gate latch of the needle, and then carefully pull your needle back through until, I'll show you when I get it up through there, you can just about see the loop sticking out there proud on the end of the bag. All you need to do then is attach the loop to the quick link that is on the end of your line or the end of your helicopter leader, like so, and then you just slide the rubber system down to sheathe the bead, and you can see it's not the best one I've ever made, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. I call it a depth charge because you create in a barrel and it goes down through the water and explodes on the bottom. Casts incredibly well because the lead is on the end of the line. And another thing I really like about it is that I can just carefully nick the hook through the PVA on the side so that it absolutely cannot tangle. The hook bait there is a bunch of maggots which I've threaded onto the end of a small piece of BOILIE wafter. It's a bit of manila that I've cut down. It's a wafter, but I've cut it down to a cube so that it just hovers above the bottom with that bunch of 5 or 6 maggots enticingly sat on top, wriggling away. So as you can imagine, casts really, really well. It's very, very user efficient. So if you miss the cast with a normal bag, you get tempted to think, oh, it's all right, I'll leave it there. It's lazy angling. It will never serve you well. So if the cast isn't where I want it, I just bring it in and I can make loads of these bags up. I simply unhook the boom, thread a new one on, clip it on, and I'm ready to go. None of that faffing about. It's just nice and easy and convenient. Another great feature is because the lead is on the end of the line, not only does it cast brilliantly, but you get a great contact point with the lake bed. So if you are fishing to a rock hard spot on the bottom, then you will know all about it, because your lead will still do what it needs to do and tell you what you've landed on, which it won't do if it's hidden away inside a solid bag. Again, just to touch on the versatility, you can make the bags really, really small and increase the lead size if you wish for range, or you can make the bags big and use a small lead if you're fishing somewhere small as we are here. So there you go, that's the PVA depth charge system. I've used this in great depth for my winter carp fishing for the last couple of years. I've had fish to well over 40 pounds on it. It works brilliantly, and it's a great way of laying down a carpet of bait by repeat casting to the clip. So you put your bags out, you might want to redo them 2 or 3 hours later, and by the time you've done 3 or 4 casts with a couple of rods, you can build up an area of considerable attraction without any spodding or spomming. It works really, really well. It's one of my favourite little tactics. That's the depth charge.